Impact Leadership by Omdena is a series supporting and promoting thoughtful and sustainable leadership with a focus on building solutions to solve some of the most pressing problems of the world. In Impact Leadership by Omdena, we bring together the civic society world and the tech world to discuss and create the impact for a better future. Rudradeb Mitra, CEO of Omdena, is the host of the series. Subscribe to our Impact Leadership newsletter on Omdena's website to be notified about new pieces of meaningful content.
So I'm extremely honored to welcome Mr. Kailash Satyarthi, who was bestowed with the coveted Nobel Peace Prize in 2014. He started an organization named Bachpan Bachao Andolan, that literally means Save the Childhood Movement. His organization rescued around 113,000 children from child labor, slavery, and trafficking till date. Welcome, Kailashji, to Omdena Impact Leadership Podcast.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So I just finished reading your book, Will for Children, and it was both inspiring but also sad at certain points. I'm keen to know what gives you the biggest hope and where do you see the biggest challenge about the future of children?
The biggest hope lies in the children themselves whom we rescued from slavery, trafficking, prostitution, and other kind of exploitation and abuses. I have come across thousands of such children whom we rescued 10 years ago, or 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. When they took up the challenge, when they have demonstrated their leadership and their compassion for the betterment and freedom and dignity of other children, it brought me tremendous hope. That has always my dream, that the survivors themselves should lead the freedom of other victims of slavery and trafficking. And not only that, they have also inspired many more people in their communities and also in schools, colleges, and universities. So when the young people started coming forward in the support of other young people, that is another big source of hope and inspiration. And we have seen the results. So results and successes themselves bring hope and confidence that no problem in the world is unsolvable. We can solve any problem, and every single problem is born with the solution in its own womb. So if we have to be resilient and strategic and committed and dedicated to find that solution, I am sure that solution of the problem of slavery and trafficking could also be found. So these are some of those areas of hope.
Yeah, I actually also had the opportunity to watch your TED Talk where you talk about the need for having an anger and converting the anger to concrete actions, which I absolutely kind of agree with that. Now, coming back to the book that you wrote, and as you said, that you are very hopeful about the future, but you also extensively talk about the importance of education in eradication of the child labor. And as you know, perhaps that as a society, the access to knowledge has become very ubiquitous. How do you see that things have changed over the last 5 to 10 years over, say, 20 or 30 years ago, as the access of knowledge becoming more and more ubiquitous, how it helps you or kind of hinders you in any way, the eradicating the child labor?
Well, for over 40 years, I have been saying that eradication of child labor and education for children are the two sides of the same coin, two sides of one coin. We cannot achieve one without other. If so many children are trapped into mining and factories, farms and fields and other kind of household chores, then we cannot ensure education for all children. The same child cannot be in the classroom as well as in a factory at the same time. So eradication of child labor is must if we wanted to ensure education. But on the other hand, we cannot achieve eradication of child labor without ensuring good quality free public education for all children. So my fight has always been on both fronts. So on one hand, we are freeing children from slavery, but on the other hand, we have been fighting for their education. And that means laws and policies have to be in place and they are properly enforced. That also means that these policies and laws have to be substantiated with adequate resources and funding. And that has to be made available by the government agencies, but also by the private sector. So that has been there. Now, for example, 160 million children are working in child labor in the world. And that means 160 million empty classrooms, empty seats in classrooms. And that has to be fought together. In last few years, say 10, 15 years or 20 years, we have seen remarkable mindset change. People started valuing education. So earlier people thought that education is the key to better earning or better quality of life or seeking employment and so on. But slowly, gradually, it has grown into a different level where people thought education means empowerment, education means dignity, education means the key to human rights and human liberation, gender equity, and equality in all walks of life, justice. So education, the whole concept and the perception about education is gradually changed. And that is very, very important. So people wanted to, poorest of the poor people in the remote, say, sub-Saharan African country, they wanted to send their children to school and wanted to get education. And sometimes when the public education or the government education system is not so good, they try to send their children to private schools for a better quality of education. So that is the biggest, I would say, change now towards education. And that has also pressurized the governments to prioritize education. But on the other hand, the companies, the corporate sector also realized that for quality production, for quality and fast distribution and supply chain mechanisms, also for growing consumerism, it is important that people are educated. So industries have also invested in education for their own sake. So the combination of both these factors are very, I would say, optimistic.
So what you said is exactly what we also observe in Omdena as we grow. There is collaborators we have from 105 countries in Africa, Asia, South America, that people are really empowered in small villages, small parts of the world. And I remember that when I was reading your book, you do talk about that how education has changed from education for employment to education for empowerment. But specifically what I would like to understand that as you work with these children and as the knowledge has become ubiquitous, do you see that there is a digital divide that's still there among the poor people who may not have access to, let's say, laptops or computers, that they are not able to get that kind of quality education that, let's say, rich kids who are? Of course, the barrier has become much less, but do you see still as a big hindrance? And going forward, where do you see that work should be done on making education more accessible to, let's say, poor kids?
While responding to this question, I would like to underline here that I am not in favor that machines replace teachers, mothers, fathers, gurus, relatives, or wise people around them who bring different kind of values in the lives of young people. But on the other hand, it is equally important, it's essential that technology should be used and maximize. We have to maximize the use of technology in spreading and deepening knowledge and education and information sharing. And that is not possible without the digital education. And that means we have to also ensure that how to fill the digital divide. We have seen in last 2-3 years during the pandemic that 1.6 billion children remained out of school during the lockdowns and school closures. And we are afraid that millions of children are not able to go back to their classrooms. But the serious issue here also that 40% of such children were not able to get access or easy access or free access to online education. So when the online education is very much needed during the lockdowns and pandemic, it was necessary that every child is able to have access to quality education, as only few people could have. So that is the digital divide, and that has to be fulfilled. It means we have to invest more on free data service. We have to also work in a kind of more economic machines, means the telephones or the reading or writing pads, digital pads have to be made available to the poor children in the low income countries. And that requires political will, priority, and investment. Without investment, it's not possible. So here is a serious need that state as well as the private sector, the corporation should take hand, and the technologist can play an important role in minimizing the cost of online education or digital education. So that combine of technology, state power, and the wealth, or I would say the corporate power, have to come together and find the solutions to that without replacing the importance of teachers and other educators in their life.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. The topic about COVID time and education effect on children is a very deep topic, and we can go on talk about it. Now, coming back to the point that you said about the data part and also the machines, and I also do agree with it. But let's go into a bit more when we, on the data actually aspect of it. And when we were in Riyadh, we briefly spoke about that how Bachpan Bachao Andolan is actually using data to fight trafficking. And our listeners would be actually very interested to hear a bit more about how you are working and what all you are doing, leveraging the data to fight child trafficking.
Yeah, so needless to say that in today's world, data is the power, but data is also the problem solver. So we used to collect data of children whom we freed from trafficking or child labor or bonded labor. For years, we used to keep the data on paper. I mean, we used to maintain the files to do the follow-up, but that was maybe 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, because that was important for the follow-up of their rehabilitation, the follow-up of legal actions, and so on. Then the computers came, and we started putting data in the computers. Then the new technologies and new algorithms and the artificial intelligence and all those things were added to it. So we did not want to, keep ourselves behind the advancement made in the technology. So we have put every single data right from the information we gather, then the interventions we make. Sometimes we go to the local police, local judiciary. Sometimes we approach the employers. So we gather all the data of this procedure and very minutely computerize them. And then we also follow the timing of getting the complaints and then registration of cases or activating the police authorities or judicial authorities to go with us in rescue operations. So we also keep the data of rescue operation along with the details of traffickers, the details of those companies, the nature of those companies or those workshops which are using child labor or mines and so on. So the nature and characteristics are different in a factory case as well as a mining or brick kiln. So we have to keep all this data. Then we do the follow-up for their rehabilitation under government schemes and the follow-up of legal actions or legal proceedings that includes prosecution process, and then we try to follow it up to conviction. So that is a parallel thing goes on. But then also we keep track on the progress of that child who is rescued, the survivors. So on one hand, we keep maximum information about the survivors and follow it up. But also other hand, we try to gather the maximum information about the trafficker and the connections of the traffickers. So far we have data of more than 113,000 rescued children and survivors. But we also have data of over 28,000 traffickers. So we were able to translate that data into heat maps so that we know more about the source areas, the transit areas, as well as the destination areas of those children but also the movement of traffickers on those routes. So, on the basis of that, it becomes easier for us to depute some local activists to keep vigil on it and to ask the local agencies and also with the railway authorities. So, we have been in kind of understanding and joint action with the Railway Protection Force in India, and that has been an extraordinarily helpful situation. And we have seen the results. Within few months, we were able to rescue over 601 children, and the traffickers were caught on real time because they were taking the children in railways. So that has been quite helpful. And then we are able to provide more specific information through our heat map and other technological tools to railway authorities to crack down on traffickers on the way, on the real time. So sometimes in the middle of the night, because we know the trains, we also know the timing of trains, or roughly in 1-2 hours plus and minus, we are able to crack down. So this kind of things the BBI has been able to do. But equally important is the follow-up of their rehabilitation from the government schemes, but also identifying some of those young people to become the pioneers and change makers in their own communities. And then we give them some additional training and orientation, and that goes on.
You are listening to Impact Leadership by Omdena, where we bring together the civic society world and the tech world to discuss and create the impact for a better future. Subscribe to our Impact Leadership newsletter on Omdena's website to be notified about new pieces of meaningful content.
I must say that all that what you have been doing with the data is truly inspiring. And that able to find those patterns and then detect the people who are traffickers is truly great. The reason we do this podcast, and I didn't start with this, but is not just to share an idea, but actually to identify key topics that our AI community can actually take up and solve those kind of problems. One of the problems that you already mentioned, you also talked about the rehabilitation. Now, if I have to ask you that, can you pick one problem that you think would be very beneficial for you or overall for the child safety and reducing child labor? What would be that problem that, let's say, the global AI community can take up and try to solve?
Well, Rudraji, technology can be helpful in all walks of life, and the artificial intelligence can expedite the results through creating new algorithms and solutions. But one of the serious challenges which requires immediate attention and it has to be addressed in real time is the child sexual abuse. The growing demand and consumption of child sexual abuse material is such a serious problem that is ruining the society, the minds, the cultures, the characters, and criminalizing things and so on. So it is, I would say, it is the source of many more crimes, because once the children are lured away and pushed or sometimes groomed for production of sexual materials, sexual abuse material, then many of them develop the tendency to commit suicide, and some of them lose hope in life. But also they have no other option than to get into this kind of dark tunnel, endless tunnel where they can never come out. So they are pushed into prostitution very easily. So the children are used not only for production of child sexual labor materials, but also for child prostitution, and they become victims of trafficking for various other purposes and so on. So this is such a serious problem. And those gangs or those perpetrators, or I would say the digital mafia, are very shrewd and very fast in technology also. So today's situation is that the speed of production and uploading the material and consumption and distribution of material is so fast, it is so real time, that is very dangerous. And this end-to-end encryption is something which takes, for those people who are earning a lot of money out of this, is beneficiary, but for the police and the companies or other investigating agencies, it takes time to crack it down. So such kind of material is produced and distributed very fast and consumed very fast, and then it goes into the dark webs and dark nets, as you know, and this is growing. We have conducted a study during the first 2 weeks, I would say 10 days precisely, during the first lockdown in India during pandemic. And then it was quite shocking to learn that the demand and consumption for child sexual abuse material has been doubled, almost doubled. So the demand for porn material has also grown faster, but particularly the child porn material has doubled. So that is such a serious thing. So AI can play a very important role in tracking it, and how, I don't know what kind of technological solutions can come out. And that could be, if they come fast, then that would be useful for the government agencies, the investigation and police agencies, prosecution agencies, and so on the one hand. But also we can motivate some companies, data providing companies and other digital companies or internet companies, to work on it and use that practice, those solutions which may come out through the artificial intelligence.
Yeah, this is a problem that we would absolutely love to work on, actually. In fact, we already worked on this problem with a couple of organizations, including Save the Children. And I hope that I would be able to come and meet you guys when I will be in India and actually see how can we work on this problem. Before we end, what I would also talk about is briefly that we have this K-12 chapter, which we have chapters around the world. And the K-12 chapter is basically run by kids between 10 to 16 years old. And I was very keen to take up the problem that you're talking about, sexual abuse, if we can involve the kids themselves to build AI solutions for themselves, engaging with the global community. And this also brings to the point when I read your book on Bal Panchayat and the need of having a Bal Panchayat and working the Bal Panchayat with the village Panchayat. So I truly believe that the problems that you're talking about, we would be able to solve as a global community coming together, engaging the adults and the kids to build some solutions. Before we end, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our community?
Thank you. So I am always in favor of making technology useful for humanity in whatever manner it could be possible. And if the young people between the age of, say, 15, 16 and 18, 20, these youth are engaged in finding solutions through AI, that will be extremely helpful and useful for the entire humanity. Because these are the young people with much more fresh minds, and sometimes we come to know through the media and other sources that they were able to invent something in artificial intelligence and also in communication and information technology and so on. They are very fast in social media and so on. So that would be very useful. So they can become the problem solver if we engage them. So the young AI community can be very helpful in spreading the message of humanity and becoming problem solver and leader and champion. Simultaneously, I would emphasize here that AI and the human compassion have to go hand in hand. While we are living in the age of AI, we should not undermine or we should not ignore the core purpose of being a human being. Every human being is born with certain purpose, and the purpose cannot be to destroy planet or destroy people or destroy humanity. It is always to make the humanity and planet better than what we got when we were born. So before we leave, we have to make humanity a better place. So in the young age, if the youth are inspired and motivated to take AI in their hands and in their minds, they should keep the core values of compassion in their heart, and they should emerge as the compassionate leaders. So I always say that we need compassionate leaders in all walks of life. I'm not talking about being just empathetic or sympathetic. Sympathy is the outermost circle when you feel the suffering of others and sometimes express some sort of sympathy, and then you move on. And then empathy is inner circle when you feel the suffering of others as your own suffering. That makes you a much better human being. But empathetic people sometimes cannot hold so much pain and suffering and problems of the outer world, and they become frustrated or burn out or even depressed because they see the problems, they feel the problems, but they cannot solve. But a person who is compassionate becomes a problem solver, because compassion is a feeling of suffering for others or problem of others as your own problems and suffering, with a strong drive to take action to alleviate that suffering, to end that suffering. So in that way, one has to be quite innovative, one has to be sometimes disruptive, one has to be leader and courageous person to take risk in finding solutions. So compassionate leader is a problem solver, and AI is also a problem solver. So how the compassionate leader can hold the power of AI in problem solving would help in making this world a better place.
Thanks for bringing that up, actually, because I know you are also a very strong advocate of the need of a compassionate leadership. And you a lot talk about why do we need to have a global compassion. And I can't agree more. In fact, one of the key principles of Omdena is the 3 C's of AI, which we call about collaboration, compassion, and consciousness. So I can't stress more about what you said about the need of having compassionate leaders, and that is who are the problem solvers.
Thank you, Rudraji, for you and the entire team of Omdena. We are proud of people like you who are born and grew up in India and bringing this message of betterment and compassion and humanity through artificial intelligence and the most modern technology. That matters a lot.
Thanks a lot, Kailash. It means a lot to come with that from you. Again, thanks a lot, Kailash. It was nice talking to you, and hopefully see you sometime soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Impact Leadership by Omdena. Our mission is to support and promote thoughtful and sustainable leadership with a focus on building solutions to solve some of the most pressing problems of the world. Do not forget to subscribe to our Impact Leadership newsletter on Omdena's website to be notified about new pieces of meaningful content.